Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us on a Sunday afternoon. This conversation is organized as part of Festival for Good 2020, Asia's largest celebration of social enterprises and the social impact that they create. This year, 130 social enterprises will be showcased throughout the month-long festival across 5 different features. Festival for Good 2020 is brought to you by Raise Singapore in partnership with DBS Foundation, virtual venue partner South Beach Consortium. For those of you watching from our website, do hop over to the Zoom for a more interactive experience with the panelists. There will be a Q&A segment in the program later. Please explore the Q&A function at the lower bar of Zoom, where you'll be able to fire all your questions for the panelists and the moderator. At any point in time, if you face any technical difficulties or require any help, please use the chat function to message the host and someone will be there to support you. Today's conversation will be delving deeper into how individual consumption decision actually makes a difference. So for now, I will be handing over the time to Benjamin from Asia Research and Engagement. Benjamin, over to you.
Thank you very much, Simon. It's a pleasure to speak with you all today and to join you for this conversation about sustainable consumption and making your dollar count for impact. We're trying to understand the role of social enterprise in supporting sustainable consumption, and we want to think about how consumers can create more conscious choices and how social enterprises can support that. My own organization, Asia Research and Engagement, or ARE, is a social enterprise. Our purpose is to bring the voice of investors to Asia's sustainable development challenges. Now, we do that by creating collaborative engagement programs and bringing institutional investors to speak to companies on sustainability issues. And our main programs are on energy transition and sustainable protein. So where we connect as ARE to today's topic is obviously on the sustainable protein and the research and advocacy that we do for that. And that's both to advance alternative meats like Temasek-backed Impossible Foods or Beyond Meats. I'm sure many of you have tried those, or even Singapore's shock meats. The other part that we do is we encourage sustainable livestock production. So there we look at issues like better animal welfare or avoiding deforestation in the supply chain. So while we do research, the other panelists today are all involved in providing products, and they work across a range of categories. We'll be hearing on crafts, on coffee, and on fashion. So perhaps let's just turn to them without any further discussion from me. Emmy, Priyanka, and Wajia, please would you provide a short introduction to yourselves and to your organizations? Thank you.
Okay, so my name's Emmy Weir, and I'm based in Luang Prabang, Laos, where I'm sitting now. And Matasai is a social enterprise working with village artisans all around Laos. In terms of sustainability, what we do is we work with our artisans to make sure that they have the right skill set to increase their market reach and increase their ability to actually have their own businesses, as a lot of them are working in the village themselves. Thank you.
Thanks, Emmy. Priyanka?
Hi, everyone. My name is Priyanka Shahara, and I'm the founder of Swapaholic. Swapaholic is a social enterprise that empowers consumers to partake in circular fashion. We exist because fashion is the second largest polluting industry globally. And beyond the environmental impact, we also employ women and single mothers from lower income brackets in the need of flexible jobs. It would, however, be wrong to call them beneficiaries because we are also beneficiaries of their hard work, devotion, and strong commitment.
And Wajia?
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Wajia from Forward Coffee Roasters. Forward, we are a coffee company and also a social enterprise with an inclusive work environment for persons with disabilities, special needs, and mental health condition. For myself, I deal mainly with the HR of the company and also the coffee roaster.
So to kick off, it would be great to have a better understanding of what we mean by sustainable consumption. So I'd like each of you to address, what does sustainable consumption mean for you as a social enterprise? And should we go in the opposite order? So Wei, do you want to go first?
All right. So actually for us at Forward, our vision is to achieve an equitable and sustainable value chain from stakeholders, from the farm all the way to cup. For us, sustainable consumption, we actually look throughout the whole value chain when we import coffee from the producers, up to the point where we roast our own coffee and then serving at the end where we employ persons with disabilities and special needs. And at the retail end, where we are doing a lot, our cafes in Singapore, we try to encourage people to use less, to waste less, and to think twice if they need to use an additional, say, a plastic lid for your takeaway cup, or we encourage you to bring your own cups and then you get incentives from us. So for us, it's mainly this. And then as we procure our coffee from the Asian region, we actually import coffee from Laos, from Thailand, from China, and Indonesia. We purchase them at because they're specialty coffee beans, where they are higher quality. We also purchase it at a higher, at a premium price, and this actually gives more revenue for the producers as well. And that's something that we really, yes, it's a higher cost, but I think it's necessary, because when we look at sustainable consumption, we also need to think about where our food, where our products come from, and how are the people being paid at the top of the value chain.
So it's a full value chain perspective.
Whole value chain perspective.
Yeah. And Priyanka, what does sustainable consumption mean to you or for your social enterprise?
So for us, I think it's not about thinking as a consumer. It's about thinking as a contributor. So consumption is the act of taking, whereas contributing is the act of giving. And at Swapaholic, you're swapping resources, which means that you're giving before you actually take something. So I think it's that mindset shift of contributing respectfully, being respectful to other members of the community. So that's really what sustainable consumption means to us.
And Amy?
Well, our brand Matasai means in Lao language, where's it from? So we started from that position of you could buy mass-made souvenirs in Lawampabang at the night market that are fed to women in a sort of chain of consignment to avoid them having to pay out on products themselves. And it's actually, most of them are all owned by the same sort of companies in the end. So from that, we wanted to push the tourist dollar further. So to me, sustainable consumption is about being able to take that dollar and take it further out to people that might not necessarily have been able to access it. And with today's technology, as our company grew, and with today's technology, we've found that we now are creating a lot of our products in the villages with training, with sewing training, along with their own craft tradition, so that you have people being able to maintain a lifestyle at home. And I think during COVID, this is very pertinent. People can see that if you're at home with your family, working rather than spending time in a city, and now, I mean, especially even in the village I work in, they're actually growing a lot more vegetables at the moment because of the situation with the economy. So you have access to a lot more things and you spend a lot less money, and it's a much better living condition. So that makes sustainability very important to me.
I love the fact that with 3 different organizations, there's three very different takes. So one is much more community and labor focused, another is total value chain, and the other is consumer side mindset shift. I'm just sort of digging a little deeper into this question of the consumer themselves. I mean, what does it mean to be an ethical consumer? And how do consumers identify with businesses who implement and practice ethical or sustainable strategies? Should we go in the same order as last time? Weijie, perhaps, would you like to start?
Yeah, so I think that being an ethical consumer means you want to be informed. You want to know what actually goes into the products that you purchase. And then for us, we tell people where our coffee come from. We share about our social mission and the people that we hire to give the information to the consumers to make that choice. And I feel that with the pandemic happening and, people, in terms of the environment aspect, people tend to purchase more takeaways now. They are more conscious about wasting also. So for brands who try to use less disposables or encouraging people to bring their own reusable cup or the bowls or anything, these brands can get a loyal pool of customers that follow them in the long run. And I think that this is something that businesses need to look at to be more environmentally friendly as well, and also and other areas where they can be more giving consumers the information for them to make the choice.
And do you prefer the term ethical or sustainable, or what language do you prefer?
For us, I prefer conscious consumption. Like, you are consciously aware of what you are using, what you are purchasing. Ethical might be a bit heavy for me.
Okay, thank you. And Priyanka, what about yourself?
So I think, the good news for all of us is that 74% of 18 to 29-year-olds prefer to buy from sustainably conscious brands, whatever the semantics really mean to them. And I think ethical consumption or conscious consumption, it means the same thing, right? I think it means, to me, being mindful of what you're buying, who you're buying it from, how you will care for it, and how you will dispose of it. And if that's not up to you, then thinking about the brand that you purchase from, how they will dispose of it. Increasingly, it's definitely very important. For us, it's been quite interesting, though, because it's not just been about the draw for customers to come to us is not just the sustenance of the environment or the social side of things. It's actually really been sustaining for them a relevant closet, an affordable closet, and something that they have space for. So by decluttering and refreshing, they can stay fashionable, reclaim the value of things that they already own, and free up space in an exploding closet. So I think for them, sustainability is also, they come in to a service like ours because they want to sustain their closet. And then the environmental and social impact is just the cherry on the top.
And so, Emmy, how are you thinking about this particular question? I mean, are you a little? I guess you're a little further from the consumer being in Laos.
Yeah, except that when we do have tourists, we're very close to them. And I think for us, I mean, that whole dilemma between ethical and sustainable. Sustainability is a hard one because it's been used a lot. And I see the sustainability side of our brand in terms of we work with a lot of natural dyes. We work with preserving traditions. So we are working closely with their own motifs, their own traditions, their own special skill sets. But then we're providing them into a more modern environment, which means that they can sustain selling them. And that in some areas we work with, there's one particular range we do in the south where we have ikats from a village near the border of Thailand. And then we work with a center that's at risk of trafficking, because in Thailand, in Laos, there's a huge risk of young women in this particular area being leached over into Thailand and working in various, some dubious, some not so dubious work situations because of the lack of work in the south of Laos. So if you're purchasing that particular brand from us, that particular range, you not only are getting a village production where if we can increase the village production, it means the younger people won't go to Thailand. But then also you're helping Sengsabang, the center that does the sewing, because their sewing pays for that. It's one of their sustainable products as well. It's how they sustain the center itself. So, you know, there's the ethical side of shopping where you should know where it comes from. You should think about what you're consuming and who is being paid for it and how much they're being paid for it. So yeah, that's how I think that there's plenty of stories around there to understand. It's just that you, as a consumer, you really have to be willing to actually delve deeper and ask those questions. And as a shop here, when the tourists are here, a lot of the people we do get come to us specifically because they want to give back to the community. They want to know that we are supporting our artisans, not just trading.
So I've just noticed in chat we've got one great question, and I do really want to involve the audience as much as possible in this. So please, anyone, do drop questions into chat if you do have any questions. And actually, as I quite like this one, I'm just going to go straight to it, and I think I'll offer it to everyone. It's how can value be created for each dollar that is being spent through purchasing from a social enterprise? I think we've already been hearing some parts of answer to that, but well, I'll just leave that question. How can value be created for each dollar that is being spent through purchasing from a social enterprise? Priyanka, would you like to take that one first?
I mean, this is a very difficult question because what you value, I may not value. So I think it's how you define your values as a consumer, as an individual. And if it is more around mindful consumption, if you do care about where things come from, who is making them, how they are being produced, how they are being cared for, I think automatically there's a dollar conversion because there is a reward immediately the minute you support a social enterprise beyond supporting a regular business. So I think it just matters how much you care. And increasingly, Gen Z, millennials definitely care much more. And so it's very challenging because there's no way for us to compare and convince you to spend your money at a social enterprise apart from your own value system. So I think from our end, all we can do is educate you. We can tell you why your dollar spent goes further, why it helps more lives, why it controls environmental degradation. And hopefully that's enough to convince you.
And Weijie or Emmy, would you like to weigh in on that particular question?
Yeah, I could share a little bit. So actually for Forward, it's quite direct in a way where we employ people with disabilities and special needs. Actually, more than 70% of our company employees are from these groups of people. And when you purchase coffee from us, it gives them the opportunity to train, to hone their skills, to provide more employment for other people as we expand to more outlets. That's our main social goal, is to create more employment opportunities for these groups of people who find it difficult to find employment in society. So for us, this is the main value that you get from every dollar that you spend on us.
And Emmy, did you want to go?
I'll just say, I often get asked that question. It's about impact. I mean, we have different producers, so the impact is different depending on the group. But in general, across the village artisan group, especially the women we work with, the actual value is the impact of the money that goes. It's not about how much percentage goes back to the, we work on a fair price. They're happy to pay what we pay them. We have to mark up to stay in business. But if the impact is with handicraft in Laos, if you're purchasing, say, a hand-woven scarf or something, that scarf is not necessarily always the major income from their family. They will be doing agriculture and other activities. But what the impact of the handicraft purchase is medicine for the family, and it's the children going to school, money for school. So we know that impact in rural communities, that's what happens with that small extra money that comes in from a lot of artisanal work, because they don't rely, it's such a unreliable, it's very difficult business for all of us to get consistent income. But I can tell you definitely that's where I see most of our women pay that extra money they get from handicraft, unless they're in one of the big producer groups where it's their main income.
Okay, so what's quite interesting is that I'm hearing quite different perspectives on where the value comes from and how the value should be used, and what are the levers for driving a sustainable purchasing consumption, depending on where you're operating and how you're operating. So look, we're starting to get some audience questions through thick and fast. So if I prefer just to go with those, if that's all right with everybody. Emmy, I can see you nodding. I hope that that's okay for Priyanka and Weijie as well. So the next is, how can social enterprises like yours start a socio-economic movement for your respective industries to do more good and not just less bad? It's actually quite similar to the question that we had, the main question. So kickstarting a movement in your respective industries, how to? Emmy?
Sorry, in the handicraft or the craft area, I think it all goes back into artisanal development and allowing them to change with the times. And to do more good, you have to think beyond your own company. So an example of this would be, at the moment we're doing a Luxembourg development supported activity in remote Luang Namsa. We're training 6 different ethnic groups to sew. Now, not all those, there's only about 2 of those groups I actually work with before. And out of this, only 3 of the 5 groups will I probably work closely with. But that doesn't mean I won't train the extra 2 groups, because what we will train them to do is to have their own business. Sorry about that. Their own business, so that they can actually go and set up their own little sewing shop for their own crafts along a tourist route up there. So I think that's where the impact, that's about taking it to that next level beyond just your own company.
Okay, so within sort of the land, the geography, there's training. Priyanka, I'm actually very curious. This question, how to move the industry, I think in a certain sense, your challenge, you know, moving from one-off to higher quality is almost a bigger challenge. How would you go about that?
I think it's much harder than one might think, right? You set up a social enterprise and you feel like there will be consumers who will adopt this lifestyle when it comes to swapping in particular. You think once somebody does it, then hopefully that will be the choice that they make again and again, not just with our company, but with any other company that's in either producing sustainable fashion or practicing it in terms of renting or anything else. And like Emmy said, there has to be a generosity of spirit, and that is really our brand ethos. So we're very big on collaborations. For Emmy, it's about training people beyond just the group that she works with. For us, it's about collaborating with like-minded brands to come together to say, look, we're trying to solve the same problem. So we do that. But however, until consumers buy in and consumers say, look, we're going to exercise sustainable choices and no longer go to fast fashion or promote that lifestyle, things cannot change. It's very easy as well. I have this conversation with a lot of people. It's very easy to blame the industry and say, oh, the industry is terrible. It's producing 52 seasons of fast fashion. So, you shouldn't buy, it's their fault. They should stop producing. But the point is that as consumers, we're still buying it. We're still walking into those shops. We're still voting with our dollar for these malpracticed, these garments that are produced in a way that is promoting malpractices, whether it's to the environment or the social side of things. And so I think consumers have a huge impact on creating these movements. It's not just up to businesses. If you don't adopt it, if you don't follow these changes that we're trying to empower people to do, then it can't change. So I think that's unfortunately my answer, that it takes consumers to drive movements, not just social enterprises.
And so Wejia, I kind of feel in a sense, you're slightly in between in terms of your positioning, but again, how do you shift the coffee industry and not just execute what's in your own control?
I think to build on what Priyanka has said, it's also not just about the consumers, but businesses, and beyond just social enterprises, every other company needs to think and have this change in the mindset. It's not about producing faster, cheaper, but we also need to think about what goes into what we produce. And actually, for Forward, it's not just about the coffee industry, but we are looking at increasing employment opportunities for persons with disabilities. And this is not just our fight; it's a national movement. How can we encourage other businesses to do the same? And in fact, the government has a lot of incentives, a lot of subsidies when employers hire people with disabilities, but it's still very challenging. So we're wondering, how can we first set up this example where a company could be inclusive, where we start from scratch. Our culture is built by people with disabilities. over 70% of us are people with disabilities. Our HR culture is very different from a regular company who just want to integrate one person with disability, for example. And if we can function with mainly persons with disabilities, can other businesses then therefore do the same with just a few? That's the question that we like to put out as well, and to see, just lead by example, and then to try to create this mindset shift that other businesses could pick up.
So it's quite interesting to hear you say that, and I'd like to link what I'm hearing in terms of innovation, your HR innovation, Priyanka's consumer education innovation challenges. And one of the questions here is, it says, it feels like it costs more to be conscious. How do you, I'm gonna bring in a couple of different questions. There's another later which says, I presume that sustaining your social impact comes at a cost. So how do your social enterprises deal with trade-offs, challenges of pursuing the impact while ensuring that the business is sustainable at the same time and handling those extra costs? Priyanka, would you like to take that one first?
Yeah, I'd love to. We chatted about this, I think, briefly the other day as well. And people think as a social enterprise, it is more expensive to kind of interact with us. With Swapaholic, we try and keep it very economical, very affordable, but we still constantly get the question, if I'm swapping in my clothes, why do I have to pay you? And the education that has to go in to explaining to consumers that you're coming to avail of a service. If we're going to have a shop or an online presence that can compete with fast fashion and give you the same conveniences, the same experience, the technology, the manpower, the cataloging, the effort that goes behind that is huge. It's huge. The margins are very, very low. And you do have to pay something to sort of avail of that level of service while preserving the environment. So I think it just lends itself to a mindset shift. I think we consume much more than we need. And rather than buying 100 things that are low quality but very affordable, and this is not particularly for our business, but for others, it's probably more useful to buy one thing of higher quality that will last you longer. So it's, again, voting with your dollar. It's thinking about, how are you going to spend that dollar? How are you going to spend that money? It is about the value system at the end of the day. And I think that is the behemoth feat that we're all sort of left with, to educate customers to think of consumption differently.
So I want to bring in a linked question, which actually has now been upvoted 4 times. So is a main problem for sustainable consumption the multiple middlemen in between, and how do we resolve this issue? So I'd be quite interested to hear from Emmy.
Oh, that was a good question. Because what Priyanka is saying is very interesting, because she's trying to compete against fast fashion. Well, so are we. We have hand-woven goods in the Singapore market at the Green Collective, and I know that we can't charge much more than $89, say, or something for something, because I know that we're up against, designer brands are still charging $129 for a bit of plastic. And we've got hand-woven over, like a hand-woven piece of material that takes at least 4 days to weave. Then you've got to dye the threads beforehand. Well, that takes another week. Plus we design them ourselves. So then you've got all that time and effort we put into that. So we are direct, like that's the way we have to be, except for someone like the Green Collective, where they're our middleman in this situation in Singapore. And thank God they are, because we couldn't afford to stand alone. So they've given us a huge opportunity in rent terms and infrastructure that we couldn't have alone. But the one thing that we are constantly up against is trying to price our things at a place where people will go, oh, actually that's really worth it. And yet they're not paying for the amount of manpower that goes into it. They're paying for the love that artisan has of doing their job. And I think Priyanka is exactly right in saying that people have to understand the value of that. and they have to, I think also like even the knowledge of materials, you know, people don't understand what actually is cotton and whether it's 100% or not, you know, if they touch something. So this education process is very deep. and a lot of small brands like us, the reason we can afford to be competitive is because I live in Laos. We work under a Lao economy, but there will come a time when the young people don't want to weave, and we might have only 10 years, 15 years left in what we're doing, the way we're doing it. So we'll have to evolve also. But we keep our costs incredibly low. Even in Singapore, we work out of my friend's HDB. Like we don't have an office, we don't have to pay for office rental, or we don't pay for so many things. So yeah, as a social enterprise, you fight to keep those costs down to maintain your brand. And the consumer really has to, that question about like, how do we know if you're okay? Well, you have to follow our Instagram stories and actually see that we are there in the field doing what we do every day with passion. And then you'll understand that we're not whitewashing it, that we're not greenwashing. We actually are there doing it.
Okay. I mean, so I think I'm also hearing from you that you don't use middlemen because that is a cost that you can't afford.
Yeah, I mean, I do wholesale to people, and they struggle on selling. So I know we do work with middlemen, but we don't. In general, that's why I developed very much a consumer brand, because I felt that was really important to be able to push the product further and have control over the product being sold, the story with the product.
Right. So it's critical for messaging. Weijie, how about yourself? I mean, this question about middlemen being a challenge for sustainable consumption, is that relevant to your organization?
Yeah, actually, I would say that having middlemen is not necessarily the main problem, but more of, you know, are you able to trace where your products come from? So traceability and maybe even transparency as well. You know, how much at each stage, how does the cost stack up? And in fact, for the coffee industry, the Specialty Coffee Association has identified the 6 main stages. You know, from coffee, you farm it, you process it, and then you export it out, and then you have people who import it, the roasters who roast it, and you brew a coffee. So consumers are at the brewing stage. Most cafes, if they don't roast their own coffee, they are only at the brewing stage. For Forward, you know, we encompass the importing, the roasting, and the brewing. And then we try to go as direct as we can to companies who encompass the growing, the processing, and the exporting. And that's where we are able to cut out middlemen there. However, at low quantities, it's actually costly to import our own. It may not be as efficient as well. So for larger companies who may be able to purchase a lot more coffee at one go, then that might be more sustainable, because, you know, it reduces the cost per kg that you are importing in. The air, the fuel, the carbon emission would also be reduced, so and so forth. So as a consumer, are you able to know, you know, the traceability of the product they come in? Middlemen are not necessarily bad all the time.
Sorry, Ben, can I just
say? Please do.
I think the one common thing is that when you have in the fashion industry, and I think Emmy and I would face this, is the supply chain is very convoluted. And like Weijie said, the main problem with that is the lack of transparency. When you have a tiered supply chain, so a brand literally outsources everything. There might be 7 or 8 or sometimes 10 or 15 tiers. You don't really know. And then the product is marketed at $10. So who is getting paid? Where is it being made? What are the conditions it's being made under? And I think it's ridiculous. It's about like 70% of brands that don't even know where their products were made or who made them. It's easier to turn a blind eye just so you can have something that is very cheap, because there's a complete lack of transparency. So I think that holds true to a lot of industries.
Yeah, I mean, from ARE's work, we look at that all the time in particularly seafood sourcing. And there's middlemen or different moments where there's aggregation all the way through. Similar issues happen in palm oil and timber sourcing, although there are certification standards that look at chain of custody that allow one to be comfortable that good standards are being maintained the whole way through. But I guess as a social enterprise in a particular organization, you can't necessarily, the standards don't necessarily exist. Like, what is the sustainable fashion standard? I accidentally clicked on answer for a question here, and so I'd like to go to it, and it's a slightly different direction. As a social work student who's interested in social enterprise, do you have any suggestions or recommendations on how to develop this passion upon graduation, and what are the available opportunities? And I wonder if we can each try answering, you know, within specifically the sustainable consumption organizations, or whether your organizations are looking for people.
I can take this first, because in fact, I have an intern right now who is a social work major and is graduating soon. And it's funny because when he approached me, he just wanted to have more perspective on how social enterprises work. So not necessarily that you have to wait till you graduate, but you know, during your university years, you could take the time to work with social enterprises, because it does give you a balanced perspective on the business landscape as well, and not just the non-profit or charity landscape that most social workers would be working in. In terms of sustainable consumption, yeah, this intern, he learns everything in a company, because our team is very lean, and he get to experience everything from, you know, our workshops at a cafe, how we roast our coffee. And I think when you have not graduated yet, you actually get more, there's less trade-off, you know, and you can experience more as a student, and you know, you're not afraid to fail. You can ask any questions. It's okay. Yeah.
So I'm going to suggest that they send in their CV. Okay. All right. Good luck. Whoever that was, it was an anonymous question. So there's another interesting question here. It's actually from Sindin. Most of the askers are anonymous, but Sindin isn't. So who, in your opinion, plays a bigger role in the move towards social environmental sustainability? And again, I'd like to think about this particularly in the consumption space. Is it government, NGOs, brands, retailers, individuals, consumers, or manufacturers? And Emmy, we haven't heard from you for a little. Would you like to pick up that?
I have a bit of a problem about, which there's another question here about how, actually, just to tie it in with another question, it says, how can we be better consumers when we have to use energy, we have to use this, we have to use that? So I really feel for these women, particularly women who feel that they have to be incredibly good consumers while they're trying to run a family, while they're trying to get to work, while they're trying to, you know, do a lot of these jobs. And they're supposed to be like saving every bit of plastic to reuse, saving this to reuse. And they're like, you know, it's kind of can weigh a lot on people's minds. So I actually think governments have to make a stand. And I think they have to make a decision to be greener, and they have to cut people off to do a better job. I mean, we have a big problem with trash in Laos because of education. And it's not because it's not trash. Not everyone is throwing trash. It's actually a cultural thing where they just haven't been taught not to throw trash sometimes. So it's very hard to go into any culture and impose what you think is right if the government hasn't imposed it, you know, like hasn't made people change their mindsets and, you know, brought in some education from a low level right throughout the country, you know. So I think the governments need to stand up first, and then especially against some of the bigger companies, you know, like in Asia, they sell everything in small sachets, and we know that's necessary because people don't have much money. But there's also no education about that there's a way that they maybe can buy a slightly bigger sachet and less pollution. You know, it's like there's a way of bringing it, and that would never change unless someone talks to Unilever. So I think it's the big companies, and then the governments need to push them as well. And then I think it's the consumer as well working together. But I definitely don't think you can just put it all back on the consumer.
Sure. But I think, yeah, it does need multi-sector collaboration. I wonder, Priyanka, I mean, you're much closer to the consumer. Do you think that the other, say, stakeholders can support in the context of your organization? Or does the government help with innovation, or is innovation bottom up?
Well, the government does help. I have to do a shout out to RAISE. We're all here today because they are putting in this incredible effort and they've all supported us in different ways. So thank you. It is an uphill feat though, because from the government sector, I do understand the challenges they face. Not to say they shouldn't do it, but the challenges they face is that it does take an impact on GDP, which then impacts jobs. And there's so many, ripple effects of making decisions and educating. Not to say they shouldn't do it. They should be spending more time innovating. And I completely agree with Emmy that the government does need to take a stand, which is sometimes very difficult for them, but it is the need of the hour. We are in the midst of a climate crisis, and that means government has to stand up. However, I do feel there's an equal responsibility for all stakeholders, and it's just a question of who should go first, and then who sort of follows suit. And the government is one of the first stakeholders that have to play their part. Of course, people like us who have the ability, the means to try and do something in our own small way, it's our responsibility too. And then, of course, consumers to say, I want to look around. I'm open to the education to change my mindset. So I think everyone has to play their part equally. It's no one's responsibility more than the other, but yes, it has to begin with institutions that have the capacity to propel change, to reach more people, and therefore the government's, the accountability starts there.
Thank you. And Beijia, do you have anything to add from your context?
Yeah, I agree as well. The government has to, kickstart this because they have the resources, they can engage the big companies. And in fact, just to share a little bit, there is this packaging partnership program happening. It's an initiative between the NEA and the Singapore Manufacturing Federation to encourage businesses to reduce their packaging. So yeah, so we see this kind of initiatives coming up, and it's really very encouraging to see big businesses to start to look at the waste management, and then it trickles down where small businesses like us, we could start right. Because it's a lot easier to manage when you are starting a business from small, and then we look at the right practices, the standards that are there that we can follow. Because if there isn't a leader down there, then nobody will know what the standards, and nobody will do anything about it.
Okay, thank you. I feel like saying something in support of my panel, actually. I do think that government is absolutely critical, but I also think that we need innovators and entrepreneurs, whether they're the type of entrepreneurs that start businesses, or whether they're the type of entrepreneurs and innovators that do things within businesses and try to create change. We shouldn't forget that role. We shouldn't forget the role of people such as the panelists here today. So, okay, let's have a bit of fun with this one. Most of today we've been talking about social enterprise. We've just touched on government. So here's one question. It's saying all the big brands are jumping on the bandwagon to show that they are ethical. How can we know which organizations are legit and are not just producing good marketing and branding? And I feel that Emmy might have some strong opinions there.
I touched on that question before because I thought it was a good question. I think, like when you're in someone's feed and you want to find out more about them, the first thing you should do is go to their about page on the website and then try and read more into what they're actually doing. And then I think you have to actually engage and ask the questions, or see who they're associated with as well. That always helps as well. Definitely, I mean, as part of RAISE, we all have to pass the bar, to be part of RAISE. As part of the Green Collective in Singapore, everyone has to pass the Millennial Development Goals to actually get into the collective. So I think you should look at those sort of organizations that do provide that stamp of approval on things. And yeah, and then with the bigger organizations, I think you really have to start asking them the questions directly sometimes, because I feel the same way. I'm like sometimes, so, how do I really know this material is recycled? And how do I really know that you actually are changing this whole line of product, And as Priyana said, yeah, it's not easy to see, especially in the fashion industry.
Priyanka, I wonder whether you had a particular comment on that one as well.
So greenwashing is something, I think Emmy touched upon it slightly, but greenwashing is sort of now being used as a marketing tactic, and that is genuinely true. But I also think consumers are today much smarter than we might think. And it is about asking the question. So if you want to know, you will know. It's easy to sit back and say, oh, I didn't know, or I saw a certification or it said organic and therefore I just purchased it. That's sort of you just deluding yourself because it's the easier thing to do. But I think if you ask the questions, if you follow the brand, and I sometimes feel it's easier, it's easier for you to hold small brands like ours accountable. And I always appreciate people who ask us the right questions. So even when we were scaling into being an online business, we had a lot of people ask us, the right questions to say, how are you going to then set yourself apart? Because now it just seems you're going in the direction of fast fashion. And I appreciated that because it gave us an opportunity to talk about our stand. So it is about really, as a consumer, asking, being observant, and not just taking things necessarily at face value, because that is the easier thing to do.
So I'm just a little conscious of time, and I just wanted to ask one quick story. Thank you for your answer there on greenwashing, and I should actually mention from ARE's perspective that we will be publishing a study, hopefully this year, it might be next year. We'll be looking at 160 roughly large food buyers in Asia, could be restaurants, hotels, supermarkets, and we'll be looking at what they say in their sustainability about responsible sourcing, which of course directly translates on. I can tell you that of the 160 odd large listed Asian food buyers, there's not a huge amount of discussion about their sustainability standards. It's something that really does need to be changed over time. But yes, I was just saying in terms of time, I don't want to forget to give you guys an opportunity to tell consumers, anybody on the call, how to get in touch with you. So I just wonder if we can quickly each go through that. Priyanka, would you like to start?
Yes. So, well, we've been an event business for the last 3 years. And just before the pandemic, we were very fortunate to launch our online presence. So you can interact with us if you're an online shopper. You can convert to being an online swapper at swapaholic.com. And if you prefer the physical experience, then you can come down to our swap shop at Orchard Central and start swapping. And you might be surprised if you haven't tried anything secondhand before. I think it's worth a try because there is just, you don't have to do anything until you actually like the experience. And then you can choose to spend your dollar and vote your dollar to support us.
Thank you. And Weijie, where should people go?
Hi, yeah. So you can check us out on our website, forwardcoffee.com, forward, FOREWRD, because some people spell it as moving forward. Yeah, and that's a wrong spelling. Or you can find us at our cafe. The most public facing one will be at Temasek Shop House. We're open 7 days a week here, but on shorter duration for the weekends. Drop by for a coffee, taste the specialty coffee from Asia. Get to know our people. Our people are very friendly. They like to interact with people. And then, yeah, can connect with us through our social media as well. I do personally reply to some of the messages on Facebook and Instagram also. It's the easiest way to reach out to us if you have any questions.
Sure. And Emmy, how can people
find us? So Matesai is matesai.com. So we have upgraded our digital presence. We've always had one, but we've just upgraded it during this period, of course. But if you are in Singapore, we are at the Green Collective in Funan Mall. And when we do start to travel again, I encourage you to come to Laos. It's a beautiful country of very authentic experiences.
Okay, and beyond your own organizations, how can consumers, do you think, be part of the good through changing their consumption habits and supporting social enterprises more broadly? I wonder if we could just sort of have a minute of closing comments about how to do that. Emmy, would you like to go first?
Well, I think a lot of the things that we sell are not essentials. They're like gifts and homewares and fashion. So I think when you're looking at that, I think you are looking at something that's tasteful and you like yourself. So the product, if you're going to support a social enterprise, don't just support it because it's good, because it's doing good. Support it because the product is good, because that's what's important. In the end, our product has to stand alone in Singapore without us in Laos telling the story. So I think that you should like what you buy, and then B, you should like the story that goes with it.
Sure. I just wondered, I mean, that point about the product needs to compete on its own grounds is highly relevant in sustainable protein. In fact, that was the business model innovation. We've had mock meat for hundreds, if not thousands of years in Asia, but the innovation where it wants to specifically compete on taste is a more modern one, although those organizations typically aren't social enterprises in quite the same way. Wei Jie, how should consumers be supporting this movement and social enterprises?
Yeah, I feel that there is a social enterprise for everything. So don't look at social enterprises as an industry, because we exist in every industry. You know, if you want events, you want flowers, you want coffee, everything, there is definitely like a social enterprise dabbling in something everywhere. So, you know, when you do your search online, you can just search for flowers, social enterprise. I'm sure you can find a few, in fact. So yeah, just keep an open mind and, you know, try, like as a consumer, you want to try different things, right? You can try out social enterprises as well.
Okay, so just take your product and add social enterprise to the Google and see what comes up. That's not a bad idea. And Priyanka, I wonder if you want to share it particularly.
I think I echo the sentiments. I think you just have to have the desire to look for social enterprises and to want to make that mindset shift. And I do think you'll be pleasantly surprised, because when you do it once, I think sustainability begets sustainability. So if you do it at Swapaholic, you might want to go to Forward the next time, because you might say, okay, I supported one social enterprise. That was a good experience. Let me try another. And then you might hop over to the Green Collective and, you know, look up for Emmy's products. So I think that just starting that journey will definitely make you think about how you can expand it into other, aspects of your life or the things that you're looking for.
Does anybody have any sort of final thoughts that they'd like to share?
I just like to say that one thing first is that we have to be an enterprise to survive. So the ones that will survive are very entrepreneurial. And for that, the social worker who said they want to come work inside, I mean, I think if you want to be involved in a social enterprise, one thing you have to do is you have to sell. So the hardest thing for a lot of people is the amount of business skills you require to make a successful enterprise, like any enterprise.
Actually, that's something very much in my own personal journey I've really found. I was like a sort of content research guy who had to learn how to sell, and then the next thing was how to build a team. So I was really taking something from Wei Jie's comment there about how you structure human resources in that kind of challenging context. So look, I've really enjoyed the talk today. It's been wonderfully wide-ranging. We've gone from, consumer mindset shifts, the importance of education and training, that there seemed to be some consensus that businesses have to, that government rather, has to take the lead somewhere in terms of setting sustainability standards and driving them. And of course, there's a shout out to Raise. Thank you. And then also this question of how to avoid greenwashing by consistent asking and challenging of businesses, and really making sure to understand more about the particular product. And I guess also that, running a social enterprise typically is a little bit more difficult than running a business, because running a business is already hard, but social enterprises are wanting to go that much further than the legal minimum standards in terms of sustainability. So, please do consider that, and please do look for social enterprises, whether the 3 today or in whatever category and product you're looking for. Do find the organization that's out there to support a more conscious choice for you. So I guess, yeah, thank you very much to Priyanka, Emmy and Wajia, and really appreciated it. And I guess it's just for me now to hand back to Suman.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, panelists and moderator, the panel, for sharing so much with us. I think it's something that I took away, that every one of us just has to take the first step to be asking questions, or to be even looking out for products and services from organizations whom we kind of align our values with. And I think as of us, this step to do, together we can become a very powerful push and pressure, I guess, to make then every enterprise a social enterprise, so that it becomes the norm for all enterprises to think about the social and environmental effects they have for everyone. So for those of you who wish to connect with any of our panelists, we are going to send out their LinkedIn links on the chat now, so you can go and check it out. And if you don't know where to start, besides going to Google, like what Wei suggested, first check out our festival website at festivalforgood.sg. All our social enterprises are there. You can check them out in the different categories that you would like to have. And we are going to be open for another week, so do support it. And last but not least, join us for our next conversation happening on Wednesday, 18 November at 4:30 on Making Diversity Count. How do you find ways for inclusion in the community? Thank you and have a great Sunday. See you soon.